Far too often, LGBTQ plus business owners believe they have to choose between authenticity and being successful. Through these real-life stories, LGBTQ plus listeners aspiring for success can gain valuable insights to navigate their path to being both queer and successful. Hello, everyone. It is me, Hunter J. McNair, your hostess with the mostest, back again for this week's episode of Queer and Successful. Now, it's Pride Month, so happy Pride Month to everyone who's listening. If you are not celebrating, I don't know what you're doing with your life. You should be celebrating Pride Month. It is a joyous time of celebration and love. Now, this week, I am joined by my good Judy, my good pal, Mike Zinicola. Now, we don't talk enough about Mike Zinicola in this call, but Mike is like the number one LGBTQ plus real estate agent in the country. Now, while that sounds intimidating, Mike is one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. You'll see that he is very calm in demeanor and knows his stuff. So I really hope that you enjoy today's episode. Now, if you have not checked out the Success Prism Network, what are you waiting for? Go to queerandsuccessful.com to learn more about that. Now, take a listen at today's call. All right. Welcome back, everyone, to this week's weekly call. And this week we are joined by a really good friend of mine, Mike Zinicola, my good Judy, my good pal. You have been on this podcast, this call before with me, and I'm happy again to have you back this week to talk about how being the nicest and most prepared agent lets you win when it comes to negotiations.
Right.
For anyone who doesn't know you, Mike, why don't you introduce yourself, and then I'll add more toot to the horn.
Okay. All right. So I practiced law for 17 years before I sold real estate. And 5 of those years, I worked for a real estate investment trust who would buy $20 to $50 million properties. And I was in their acquisition department, and I helped negotiate the deals. And I used to have to convince the other side why we were only willing to pay $30 million on their $35 million property. And that required a lot of preparation and a lot of and there was no room for emotions on this. There was just room to negotiate and show why your offer is the best deal they're ever going to have. And so anyway, I didn't like practicing law that much. And in 2000, I decided to get my real estate license. And I went from an industry where you really became good at a certain craft. And if you became good at that craft, you wound up doing well. And then I came to real estate where it's more about lead generation than being good at your craft. And I've been practicing for real estate for about 25 years. In 2004, I met my now business partner, Greg Erlinger, and he and I formed the Easy Referral Network in Ohio. We're an expansion team at Keller Williams. We're in the top 15 teams every year in the company. And that's me.
Well, you are really amazing. And you say, all the things that you can say about yourself. I think that one of the most notable things that people know about you is that you are kind. Out of everything that you do for both your business and your company with Keller Williams, I would say that the one thing that people know most about you is that you're kind and that you've got a great heart.
I appreciate that, and thank you for that comment. And I'll be remiss if I don't mention this, that I started through the KW Rainbow Network, the LGBT Housing Initiative, which raises money to help LGBTQ plus homeless youth elevate off the street or avoid suicide. And if there's anything that I've done in the last 25 years that I will remember when I'm 90, it's that. I'm so grateful that the Rainbow Network has supported this and done and worked with us, and we're able to do a lot of good things.
Yeah, I'll honestly never forget that moment when we were in that room in the basement of the LGBT Center of New Orleans. And,
Hmm.
you stood up and you didn't say this. You say you didn't say it, but I will always say that you said this, or you
Okay.
said, we have home for heroes. Why not home for homos? And
I did not say that. The person sitting next to me said that. And I said,
basically you said
right.
it.
Well, yes. So we didn't name it that, and we were probably right in not naming it that. But um, we are thrilled that we put the organization together under the other name, the House.
Yes, not home for homos. That
No,
was not the choice.
that was not me.
And that was, well, my memory serves differently, but we're here now and good things have come of it, right?
Yes,
How much has been raised now? How much has been,
over a half a million
I was
dollars, and
gonna say it's,
it goes to grassroots organizations in towns where they can really use the money to elevate youth off the street. When parents kick their kids out because they're part of the community, they become our kids, and we have to take care of them. And so that's the goal of the initiative, and it's LGBT Housing Initiative / donate if anyone cares.
it's Pride Month, so you know where you should be putting your dollar at. Well, let's kind of go back and talk more about our topic for today, which
Yes.
is about negotiations. And, break this general concept down for me, right? Like,
Okay.
when you're saying the nicest and most prepared agent wins, what are we talking about?
Okay. So in general, when you're negotiating a deal, there's two styles of negotiators. They're the ones that slam their books down and say, I'm not taking that amount of money and you're crazy, and they walk out of the negotiation room.
Mm.
And there was actually a series on HGTV, and it lasted one season. And it was a guy like that. At 19 minutes after the hour, he slammed books down and left the room, and somehow they followed him and got the deal done. It happened all the time. And you know why it only lasted one season, Hunter?
I'm assuming because it wasn't real.
Because they tried it 7,000 times and it only worked 16. And so
Mm,
they couldn't have other shows about it because no one likes that.
yeah.
My concept of being nice and prepared in your negotiations is ours is the only industry that relies on its competitors to make a living.
Hmm.
If I always tell people when I teach this class, think about the 5 to 10 people in your city in which if their buyer looks at your listing or your buyer looks at their listing, you hope the buyer hates the home because doing business with that person is too difficult.
Right.
When you're negotiating, you don't have to be mean. You just have to be nice, professional, and prepared. So, for instance, let me give you an example of a situation where this happened. I had a $625,000 listing. It was probably worth 600 to 625. Person came in, they offered 550. You have to present it to your client, and your
Yeah.
client said, "Well, forget it. Don't even respond." And I said, "Well, no, we're not going to do that. I'm going to get these people up. So let's respond. I asked them, let's say they offered 600. What would you counter at?" And he said 620. I said, "Okay." I said, "Let's counter the 550 at 620."
Yeah.
Now, when I got the offer, the agent literally said, "We don't think the house is worth this much. This is all we're offering."
Mm.
I go, "Okay, whatever." But he also told me in the feedback, my clients really like this home. It has a stream in the back. They're moving in from Connecticut, and they had a stream in the back of their yard in Connecticut. Okay. So instead of just throwing out the 620, I said, okay, how do I put this out there that makes them interested in the house?
Mm.
So first of all, I thank them for their awful offer. Thank you so much for writing an offer on this house. I know you're going to love the house. Your agents told me how you had a stream behind the house. This one has that same similar. It's just going to be so comfortable with you. Thank you for your offer. Unfortunately, we can't sell it to you at that price. And then I said why. I did my preparation and I showed them the comps. I
Mhm.
showed them why this offer was not right and that 620 was a better price for this. And so they came back at 575. And I said, well, you're getting close. I wrote back and said, well, that's still not enough because of the things that I told you before. Um, and they also asked for the washer and dryer that wasn't included in a home warranty.
Mm,
I gave them those because I wasn't budging on price.
right.
They were spending negotiation time on these small little items when we were at that point
Talking about bigger
45,000
things.
in price. So
Yeah.
anyway, they came back. We went back and forth. We sold it for 615.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
my client, who didn't even want to respond to them, was very impressed. And he's the sales manager of a Fortune 500 company. And over the years, he has sent me over 22 deals. Well, he sent me 22 deals. He's referred me. And he always tells his people, when you get to the offer, Mike writes a letter explaining your position. And people love that. And
Right.
so my negotiations are a extra lead generation.
Mm.
So let me tell you that my favorite thing about this. This actually occurred 10 years ago. 2 years ago, I got this call. Mike Zinicola, you don't know, you probably don't remember me, but I bought the house on Evergreen 10 years ago when you were the listing agent. And when I did, the seller had a better realtor. And can you please list my house because we don't want you on the other side next time?
Oh, that's too funny.
That was my favorite call in 25 years in real estate.
Well, what's so funny about this conversation already is, I think going into it, we assumed that the conversation would be around the most nice aspect of this, right?
Mhm.
But I think what we've already kind of touched on is how much preparation plays into this.
Right,
But preparation comes in so many different ways, right? Being prepared to offer comparables. Go ahead.
right. You need to know what your comparables are. You
Right.
need to know the condition of your property so you can
Mhm.
speak honestly about that because you don't want to lie.
Yep.
You need to know about the motivation of the buyer.
Right. And you
Or,
got that from the showing,
right,
the
right,
feedback,
right.
right?
Because I always
You
say,
got information. Yeah.
right. So when someone asks for me for feedback, if I know I'm going to be in multiple offers, my feedback is a spectacular home. But
Right.
if it's not in multiple offers, I'll say something great about the property. Because, by the way, no one believes people write an offer on some house they don't like.
Right.
But so I tell them something good about the property, but I always say something they're concerned about.
Mm,
So that it's not like we're just willy nilly going to offer you anything because we love this house.
right.
So when I give feedback, I give good feedback with a couple of concerns.
It's intentional. You're being intentional even in your feedback because you're
Correct.
understanding that the negotiation conversation starts before you even
Right.
make the offer. And I know you've spoken in the past that negotiations start before you even show, right? Like when the showing gets scheduled.
Well, I ask in my class when the
Mhm.
negotiations start, and people always say, you know, when you first meet the buyer, first meet the seller, et cetera. The negotiations start the day you get your license.
Mm,
And here's what I'm going to have an example of it.
yeah.
I had a $2 million house listed in Cleveland, which is there's probably about 10 of those a year. There's not a lot of them. And this guy said, well, it's been on the market for 6 months, but now that you guys have it, I have to come see it. So he came see it and he hated it. It wasn't right for him. And I said, well, I can show you other things. And he said, no, I only go to the listing agent. But I have a good reputation along the lake in Cleveland. And so people call me and say, do you have anybody? So
Mm,
my one agent I've done 100 deals with calls and says, Mike, do you have anybody for this house? It's 1,750,000. And I said, well, I might. And I called this guy and said, I know you only go with the listing agent, but I can get you in. You'll be the first person in this house. How about that? But you have to go through me. He said, fine. He was fine. He did that anyway. So we went in, we loved the house. We offered 1,750,000 cash. That afternoon, someone else went in and wrote 1,800,000 cash.
mm,
But it was one of those 10 realtors that everybody hates.
right.
So the agent came to me and said, I got permission from my seller to tell you that the other one's 1,800,000 cash. But if I told her, if you met that price, this will be a smoother transaction.
Mm,
So I got a 1,800,000 deal. It's like $46,000 commission or something that I wouldn't have even had this client ever again. simply because my reputation from the start is I work with realtors and I get deals done.
Well, and here's the thing too, right? You've been doing this for a hot minute. I've been doing this for 10 years, right? And
Hmm.
we have seen market shifts as well, right? Some of our markets
Right,
are even shifting now. And I remember when we were in, that really hyper COVID market. And we would have buyers. I was still working just listings at the time, but we would have our buyers winning because they wanted to work with our team, right? We would have on my side when I was rejecting buyers, right? We were getting, 20 offers or something, wild like
right,
that in listings. And when I was rejecting offers, I made a point to like reach out to all the agents and, basically tell them personally that their offer hadn't been accepted, to reach out to me if they would like any advice or anything like that. And everyone would say, at the time, because it was so wild back then, they were saying, "Why are you wasting, quote unquote, wasting your time?
you
Go
weren't wasting your time.
You're not wasting your time at all going to all these agents and telling them like, they lost, who cares?" And I was like, and it's like, well,
Right,
now fast forward 5 years from then, I have a much better position in my market where agents remember me, right? Agents
correct,
who had buyers back then now remember me as actually being the kind one, not the one who left,
right,
your voicemail on red, right? So,
right,
you saying negotiations starting at the time of your license makes sense to me, right?
right. You establish who you are and whether or not agents want to work with you.
Hmm.
And if they do, you get more deals done.
And
Because
that's what we should be wanting to do.
people, if you go to any real estate office, they'll say, "Oh my God, I got a deal, but it was from blah blah," and the other person rolls their eyes. That is not good for blah blah.
Right.
It, it
Yeah.
just isn't, because no one wants to do deals with them. And then if they are in multiple offers, you're going to work hard to get the other people up because you don't want to do a deal with them.
Well, and what's funny is, we have on our team an MVVBP, a mission, vision, values, beliefs, and perspectives, similar to how Keller Williams does.
Right,
And part of our vision is to be the hire of choice, but along in that paragraph says realtors want to work with us. Other people
right,
want to work with us. People in the market want to do business with us because they know we do a good job. We hold the deal accountable, we get things done,
right.
and it only benefits the clients.
And for your current clients, there's no place in the transaction that you can give more value to your clients than at the negotiation process, because that affects the terms and their pocketbook.
Hmm.
And that's what, remember. NAR did a study, and they said, "What's important to you as a realtor?" And prior to buying a house, I'm going to read these because
Yeah.
it's finding a great home, advice on financing, making sure the home's in good condition, walking them through the process, and then negotiating a good deal.
Mm.
They asked people after the transaction, what was important to you? And the two things that were more important, number one was walking the client through the process, and the second one was negotiations, because people remember that and they talk about it. And if you do something extra that other agents don't do, like write a deal letter, that
Right.
makes you stand out.
Yeah, and I know you talk about your letter a lot, but just for clarity is kindness. We're not talking about love letters.
No, we're
We're
not.
not talking about, fair housing rule breaking love letters.
No,
You like to call them, I mean, I think I like to call them qualifying letters, essentially. Like, my
I I
responsibility
call I call them deal letters.
deal letters. Okay.
Deal letters. Letters about the deal. Letters about why my client's contract is the one that you should take.
Right. Why they're able to purchase it, why they're going
Right.
to close,
Right.
really what the seller cares about, right? The seller
Right.
wants to know they're getting the best buyer with the best price, the best terms. That's going to be the easiest
That's right.
to
And
do.
also always know who your audience is.
Mm,
So I had this one deal. It was a good friend of mine. He was an accountant. And, when it got to the point of writing the offer, I had to bring over 72 comparables. And we said, well, that one had a half bath and this one only had, blah, blah, blah. And we went through it all. And now list price was 795, and we were in multiples.
mm.
And the house was not worth more than 750. And that's what it was worth. And it was interesting because no house had sold in this development for like a year and a half. I got the other agent to say, over the last year and a half, what would you think? Because he was big in that city. How much did prices go up in Westlake, Ohio? He said 7%. Well, if you multiplied the old listings by 7%, you got 750.
Right.
I
It's meant.
I used that in my letter. But so I wrote 750. I was up against two other offers and they were 770 and 775 and we won. Let me tell you why. Because we were cash and they weren't. And I knew whom I was addressing this letter to. This was an estate, and the guy at PNC Bank, the trustee at PNC Bank, was the seller. It wasn't the family.
Oh,
Now,
okay.
this knowing who that was, I knew that all he wants to do is go to work 9 to 5. He doesn't want any hassles. So I showed him the value, the real value of the house is 750. And I said, if you get some more money, you might want to make sure that it's a cash deal because this isn't going to appraise. Well, that guy didn't want to have any problems at all and
Right.
took my 750 over the two others. Now, that was a unique situation, but
Right.
you always have to know who you're addressing this to and what their
Right.
motivations are.
Right. It's almost like a game of chess, right? Because you
Right,
have to be able to kind of read the room and not just like, oh, like of course the seller's just going to want more money. Well,
right.
there's other things than just the purchase price at the end
Right.
of the day. There's so
But
many other
but
nuances.
I love that I asked the other agent how much the market had gone up since these last sales had happened. And he
Hmm.
said 7%, which was right. I knew that was, but I got him to confirm that. And in the letter,
Hmm.
I said, Mike confirmed with me that the market's gone up 7%. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
used the listing agent's own
Against them.
words.
Yeah.
And,
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's just that that's a skill, right? And I think that's something that you acquire as time goes on.
mhm,
But I think that's just a skill that people underestimate having or trying to have when they're working with their clients. Like you and I were talking about this before everyone joined on how important negotiations are and how like we really should be focusing on that as the conversation because we don't just have conversations of negotiations with our with our counter agents. We also have those with our sellers or our buyers when we're
right.
trying to tell them to lower a price or we're trying to tell a buyer how to win in a multiple offer. So negotiations, that skill set should be high for whoever you're working
Right.
with in this business. But I think what's difficult and what I want to ask you as well is when we are negotiating through repairs or with a listing agent who's not nice or a buyer's agent who's not nice. How do you kind of stay calm and collected in these kind of emotionally charged moments? Because I have had it where, and I already know the answer for us, right? But I know our team has had it where we've sent a repair request and immediately the listing agent picks up the phone and calls and yells at my transaction coordinator, like, what is this? And I'm like, you just got it, like, what do you mean?
Right.
What is this? Present it. How do you deal with that kind of?
Okay. So first off, how I deal with it is I never get upset about this stuff ever.
Yeah.
And what I do as they're yelling at me, I say to myself, that's why I run the #1 team in the state of Ohio, because I'm not that. And I don't get upset about it. Um I simply answer, well, we had the inspection and these are the things that came up. I really need for you to present it to your clients. So oh, well, they're never going to sign it. I said, well, present it. Let's see what happens.
Right. Well,
And
that's
then
the
you
thing.
just hold firm.
Well, and that's the thing that I think we have a conversation about a lot because what we tell ourselves even is you can't control the first thought, but you can control the second.
Right.
And often other people on the other side of the deal are not versed in that, right? And so being aware that they are being reactionary and
But
not
if
processing it.
but if you respond calmly
Correct.
and they continue to yell and you respond calmly, they're not unaware of that. And they
Right.
realize how silly they sound.
Yeah. It's kind of actually
It's
wild.
not for us as realtors to get emotionally charged about this. It's not
Hmm.
our house. It's your
Yeah.
client's house. We're obligated to keep our emotions out of the picture. And quite frankly, when emotions get in, you try to win some war. You know what you do? You lose the deal.
Correct. Or
I'm
you,
not interested in losing the deal.
right. You can
How do we
almost,
put it together?
yeah, there was, we even recently had a transaction where the agent, reacted in a very, and what's so funny is like they reacted very poorly, but they did it in this like long, email and never picked up the phone, right? So
Hmm.
it's like, okay, so you really are just you're just happy
Right.
with your fingers. You're not really upset. But, when someone, I think what we have to remember is when someone is reactionary to that degree, it actually really hurts your negotiating power.
Their negotiating power.
Yes, theirs, right. It,
Yes.
it totally hurts their negotiation power because they're not looking at it logically.
And if you always come at logical, you're prepared, you know the comps, you know what the repairs are, if you know it all, then facts speak for themselves.
Right.
The facts are
Yeah,
the facts.
right. We get
And
to be
so,
that kind of calm in the storm.
right. And so you just have to, just have to keep yourself. If you're that person who wants to fly off, you have to check yourself.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than that because all in all, if you're doing that, you become one of the 10 agents that you don't want to do business with.
Hmm.
That
Absolutely.
doesn't work. You know, we rely on our competitors to make a living. If you're looking at the BMW 5 Series and you hate it, the BMW salesperson does not drive you over to the Mercedes dealership to look at the E-Class. They just don't do that. But we do.
Mm.
We do. And there's no other industry like this.
True.
And because of that, it's imperative that you leave those negotiations on a good note. Oh my God, that Hunter, he's so easy to do a deal with. That works for you. You will do more deals if realtors think that.
I'm usually very nice in the beginning and then less nice as we go down. Once I get the contract. Well, I think, well, fortunately for myself, right? Like Justin, my husband, is my transaction coordinator, the team transaction coordinator. He's always like good cop. I'm always bad cop. If you got to bring me in, I'm the not nice one if I've got to get
Um,
involved into it. But it's usually, it's only really me ever having to step in if someone is reacting instead of
mhm.
responding, right? Where someone's getting belligerent instead of actually processing logically what we're doing here.
Right.
Um, it's
So,
fascinating. Yeah.
so one of the things is we're talking about being nice in a transaction.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people hear that sentence and say, that's the same sentence as being weak in the transaction. That is not the case at all.
Right.
Being nice in the transaction is getting closer to getting the deal done. You're even being stronger than someone who's being mean in the transaction because you're holding it in an effort to get your deal done. And it
Mhm.
allows you to take all the work that you prepared and present it in a positive way. So being nice does not mean being weak.
Right.
And being nice combined with being prepared is the absolutely the number one way to get your deal done. And here's the other thing. If you're representing the buyer and you write a letter, you make your presentation, the person who makes the first presentation always has a leg up because the other side now has to defend their position.
Mm.
And so be the first one, like that deal where the buyer offered 550 on 625. He sent me over it with a deal on an email that said, "This is all we think the property is worth. I hope you take the offer." Well, you know what? He could have been right. The property could have been worth 550, but he
Mhm.
never put in writing why. If you're going to offer me something that isn't what I'm looking for, it's your obligation as a realtor to tell the other side why. Because when you're presenting your offer, it's no longer about your client. Your client's already stated their position. It's about the other side accepting that. So you have to present it in a way that is most palatable to the other side.
Right. Well, and I think what you're kind of touching on too is that you cannot steamroll through negotiations without having the clarity. Like, here's what I'm getting at. I think that a lot of agents who do have these types of reactionary responses or reactions in negotiations, I think the reason that they have that is because they don't know what their clients actually want, or they haven't set expectations with their clients, and they're not working together with their client, and they're thinking they can steamroll that transaction and just push through. But part of that preparation comes in you knowing what your client needs and
Right.
being prepared to make that happen. So,
That's another part of the preparation.
right.
It's the initial conversations with your clients so that you know how this works. We have a document that we use on our team for buyers
Hmm.
that goes through every part of the process and what it means so that my agents can go through the entire process step by step by step by step to explain what's going to happen and
Right.
give them options up front so that they're prepared at the time we write the offer for how this is going to work.
Mm.
And having a client prepared for whatever gives them the flexibility and the power to make judgments that are based upon what's good for them.
Well, and do you know anything about the circle of trust? Do you know what that is? If I say the circle of trust?
Yeah, sort of. I mean,
Sort of, yeah, it was talked about in Value Squared. So the circle of trust essentially talks about how you lead with empathy, leads to transparency, being honest, being, dependent, etc.
mhm,
Regardless, the thing that they say holds trust together is setting expectations,
mhm,
right? And so what you're doing with your buyers and with your sellers is setting those expectations up front, so that you can also be prepared to negotiate on behalf of them appropriately. There's nothing worse than like when you have an agent come to you with some type of request or repair, and you just know
mhm.
they haven't set the expectation for what that should look like with their client.
Right.
So talk briefly, how would you in a nutshell, set expectations with an agent who maybe hasn't set those expectations with their client?
Well, you just have to present what your side is.
Yeah.
You just have to be correct about the
Yeah.
position that you're taking. And
Yeah.
then you cannot control the other agent and what they do. You can only be the best you.
Yeah. We always assume, like we always say, assume that this agent is just going to forward it to their client. You
Right.
know, because they probably will. If they're
Yes.
already not there, they're probably just going to take what you said and go, okay, forward. And I've had that happen. I've had agents forward me things from their clients. And I'm like, why are you forwarding this to me?
Right.
It's wild. Now, you obviously and myself are leaders within the LGBTQ plus community here. And how do you think like your identity or, really being a part of a queer space has maybe shaped how you approach business and negotiations?
Well, it's interesting. I look at it from the other direction
Okay.
as a LGBTQ plus realtor. How can I best present myself to show the value in someone in our community?
Mm,
So it's important that, you know, for me and my brand, I'm not some screaming person I'm professional. I think it's important to show you're just a professional realtor, and that will speak volumes for it. And then people obviously know that I'm part of the community.
yeah.
And
Sometimes they don't, Mike. Sometimes they're like, Mike? I'm like, very.
right, right. Well, that may be the case, but most people know.
I think it's a tell of, no matter what, right? We always have to lead. I think we came into it knowing we already have a heightened responsibility to be in a professional in the setting because we're going to be expected not to be. And I think kind of having that top of mind allows you to look at business in that kind of serious, perspective and think about how do I do this in a way that, people respect me. And I know that you're highly respected You were highly respected in the attorney world, and you've been highly respected in the real estate world as well. How do you think, well, how would you advise maybe young LGBTQ plus people who maybe struggle with being taken seriously or who may feel pressured to overcompensate or get into business in general?
Give them a reason not to think that.
Mm,
Learn your craft. Be good at what you do. When you associate with people, be a professional, a kind professional, well versed, very well prepared person. No one can argue with that. No one can argue with that. They will say, wow, that was a great transaction. They were awesome.
yeah,
Show your awesomeness by doing the right thing. Become the professional that you want to be, and you'll garner the respect.
yeah,
And
yeah,
not I, I would say that to a straight young agent who is doing the same thing, but particularly in our community.
yeah.
Um, if if you're professional and good at what you do, that'll overcome everything.
Well, and I'll tell you, we're talking a lot about kindness here, right? And being the most nicest and prepared. And I think that that's all you have to remember is in general with between, even if
Right.
it's negotiations, if it's life and business, it's just reminding yourself and asking yourself rather, am I being kind enough today?
Right.
Am I leading with kindness? Am I acting in a way that people want to be around me, and work with me? And I think that transcends all of it at the end of the day.
Right.
I know that you have continuously sharpened your negotiation strategies and, talked about this at a really high level at events like KW's Family Reunion, on podcasts and classes that I've sat in on as well. If everyone had to get one thing that they should start doing immediately to become a better negotiator, we've kind of talked about a few. Which one of those, if not maybe a different one, would you say would be the one they need to take home with today?
I would say the number one thing is that when you're negotiating with the other side and your client's written the offer or they've listed the house, make sure that your response makes the other side as likely as possible to agree with your offer. And by I'm not saying give in. What I'm saying is take your position and show them why it's the best.
Mm,
You need to have the skills to show them that your offer is the best thing they're going to get, no matter what it is, and tell them why. But it's not about proving that your client is right. It's about proving that the other side benefits from it.
mm, right.
Like, for instance, someone writes me an offer. Let's say it's a $400,000 house, and they write 370. And then I didn't offer the washer and dryer, and I didn't offer a home warranty, and they ask for it.
Hmm.
You know what? They're getting the home warranty and the washer and dryer because I'm not coming down on my price. And the other side spends so much time negotiating on $500 items,
Right.
and I'm worried about the 30,000 you want to take off the price.
Right.
It's and you know what? If you're lowballing somebody or you're offering a lot less, don't insist that it's your title company. I know I know people don't want to hear that, but don't insist that. Offer them that. If you're offering on a house and you're offering a little bit less, but your client doesn't have to sell their house to buy your house. I know most clients don't, but put that in your letter. It's another positive that they don't have to worry about.
Right.
I talk about in my letter, we are having an inspection. I've never had a client not have an inspection. And I write in the letter, the inspection is for the benefit of both the buyer and the seller because right now, over the last few years, there have been 35 lawsuits in Cuyahoga County. That's where Cleveland is. From people who sued afterwards because they said, we didn't have the inspection, but this problem should have been on the disclosure.
Mm,
And so I say, this is beneficial to everybody because if we have the inspection, the seller doesn't have to worry about post closing disclosure issues.
Mm. Yeah, I mean,
So
what you're
that's a way for me to say, we
right.
want the inspection, and but it's in your best interest as well.
Well, what you're doing is setting expectations, right? We are continuing to set expectations, even in those little nuances, like, hey, here's why we're asking for this. Here's why we're
Mhm.
doing this.
Right.
And I think also like there's sometimes there's conversations around, like you're saying, like, oh, like let people use their own title company, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes there's like learn how to lose a battle to win a war,
Correct.
right? And, I've had plenty of negotiations like that where the buyer was like, I want to have that, refrigerator that I could buy on Facebook Marketplace for $100 and it has to be in the offer. And then the seller's like, okay, but I really wanted my fridge. And then we go to negotiate repairs and the seller's like, well, I really wanted my fridge. So guess what I'm not doing now. Right. So it's remembering like, what battles are you losing? Because we need to focus on winning the real war that
Right.
it's at
Right.
hand. So
Right.
great. Well, yeah, go ahead.
No. Can I tell you one thing? The risk of love letters.
Mm,
Someone writes you a love letter. That is like so much great ammunition to have a response. I once had a person write a love letter on a particular house, and they were telling me about their autistic son who is going to love the 26 acres and he'll be free to roam on it and everything. They were trying to pull at our heartstrings,
yeah.
right? I politely used that in my counter. We know how much this is going to be a great place for your family. We're so excited about offering it to you. Unfortunately, we can't offer it to you for 750. The list price was 850. We
Yeah.
can counter it here, but won't it be great to have your son, have this carefree place to blah, 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 blah. They gave me that ammunition to put it in why they should raise their price because it's going to be good for your son. So watch what you say if you're doing love letters. It's great ammunition for the other side.
Yeah, I mean, this is the exact reason that they're so discouraged, right?
Right.
Now, Mike, I don't know if you've ever had this one, but years ago, I worked with an agent multiple times through the years, and she gave me
Mhm.
the same love letter twice.
That's funny. I love
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was like,
the standard love letter.
yeah, it was like a template. I was like, I'm not going to say her name, but I was like, blank.
I once got an offer an agent who was also an attorney, which I couldn't believe. Um, they sent a pitch. This was a city that's probably 97% white.
Hmm.
And they had their clients in their Sunday best, the father, the mother, the 13-year-old boy, and the 7-year-old girl in their like a little dress and little suits and everything. And they sent the picture. I called, I said, Colleen, what if the other person is African American? I am not submitting that picture to my clients. Are you crazy?
Yeah.
You just have to be very careful. You cannot do that stuff.
Well, yeah. I mean, you really don't know what you could turn people off from,
Right.
regardless.
Right.
I
But
mean,
talking about the deal, talking about your down payment, talking about the great mortgage company that you're
that's
doing
what it should
business with,
be.
talking about you're not going to give a laundry list once we have the inspection.
Right.
We teach our I say we coach our clients that the inspection is not a reason to renegotiate, is to care for um, substantial material, operational, safety, health and health issues. That's what we're doing this for. It
Yeah.
makes it seem more reasonable.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're setting, like I said, you're setting those expectations with your client up front so that even when they're negotiating, it
Mhm.
all is reasonable.
Right.
And
Also, if you're actually sending an offer that's lower than the price, don't send an even number. Like if you're offering, if it's a $400,000 deal and your client wants to write 470 or 370,
mhm.
go 372. You're not going to get it anyway. It's probably going to be countered. And so, but offering 372 makes it look like you've analyzed why the 372 was right. 370 just says you're just throwing something out in the air.
Now you do know that 370 is still an even number, right?
No, that's not. No, what I'm saying, yeah. No, what I'm saying is a round number, like
Oh,
360,
okay.
350, 375. Those were
Yeah, make it look intentional.
instead of saying, oh, they just took 25,000 off and offered 375, do 376. Oh, they really thought about this because they're asking for 24,000 off.
That's so funny. I once had an agent give me an offer letter where the last three numbers were the street address. It was like 139 Happy Street. It was like 270 139. They
Yeah.
didn't win because that didn't work.
Right. Well, I'm
But
not saying to do that. I'm just
yeah,
saying
yeah.
because that just seems like a gimmick.
That is a
Right.
gimmick. So
There's
there's a
no
difference. Yeah.
there's no reason to do a gimmick.
Yeah,
But
there's a difference.
like a
Yeah.
376 offered, oh, they asked for 24,000 and then you have a letter explaining why.
Right.
You
Right.
you've done analysis. You didn't just throw a number out.
Well, and I think it's a conversation on like ability. I think what I like to call it is an ability to perform letter. And, even if we're in multiple offers and competing at a high level, we would still reference numbers and say, appraisal, like that kind of stuff matters, right? Because we want a
Mhm.
smooth transaction, at the end of the day. So,
Right.
well, this was a great conversation, Mike. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks for listening today, friends. If you enjoyed this call, do not forget to join Queer and Successful, the community on Facebook, as well as register to participate in these calls live every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern at successfulcall.com. See you next time. Bye.